Hey everyone, welcome back to Now We're Really Talking. In this episode, I'm joined by Glen Markey. Glen lost his daughter to suicide in 2015, and since then, he's dedicated himself to campaigning for changes in how schools support young people's mental health. A quick content note before we begin. We talk in depth about suicide and loss throughout this conversation. If that feels too much right now, please take a break or skip this episode. If you need to reach out for support, you can contact Samaritans on 116 123 or text SHOUT to 85258 or visit mind.org.uk for more resources. You're not alone and help is always available. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Now We're Really Talking, a podcast where we really deep dive into mental health journeys and stories and how mental health impacts on people. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Glen. Glen's somebody who, when I first launched the podcast, he was somebody who I really wanted to have on, and one of the reasons I think his story and the person he is was one of the key reasons I wanted to start a podcast to have these conversations. So, yeah, I'm very excited. How are you doing, Glen?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you, Paddy, and thanks for that bit of an accolade. That's really kind of you, mate. Really kind.
No, it's all the truth. We've known each other a short while, but I think, what you're doing is incredible, and I think we'll get into that later on. So I just want to start off. Obviously, we'll talk on what you're doing at the moment and more recent events. But you yourself, when was it that you first kind of discovered and heard about mental health? And when did it become a big thing for you?
It's a great question. I mean, I've always been aware of people's mental health issues, obviously. And I think mental health, was discussed, several years ago. Maybe not so much in terms of the ban of mental health, but people talked about stress, people talked about suicide, different things. But obviously for me, I unfortunately, got to look into mental health more after losing my daughter. So Helena was just 17, and clearly at first you don't know which way to turn. But afterwards, when things settle down, you start to reason with everything, and you start to ask questions why. And obviously, suicide is very complicated. And at that point, then, I really did start to get involved with, how can we stop this from ever happening again to another young person? Which then widened my sphere about the knowledge of mental health. And over the last few years, I've learned so much, and I think there's been such a good movement, in terms of making people more aware of looking after their mental health, but also, being aware of how others' mental health is, and doing the best we can for everybody, really. I don't know if that's in a roundabout way answers your question, but I mean that's just my honest route in and around mental health, really.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking what you've been through, but kind of before that, was it you worked in kind of the rail industry, and you said it was kind of talked about in stress, but did you feel like you could talk openly about your mental health when you were working and throughout your life? Or do you think it's only been a movement more recently where you've been able to kind of be open about how you're feeling?
I think so. I mean, if I go back to my days when I worked in the railway, and I started from sort of way back when on the shop floor, worked my way up through into the offices, into management positions. But, even in the management positions, when we were first under pressure and in stressful situations, we didn't talk about it. And in fact, it was almost sort of you were almost expected to sort of be able to tolerate whatever was thrown at you. You were a manager, you had these things to deal with. And now, we didn't talk about mental health, and I certainly didn't feel like talking to people too much. I often felt that if I kind of showed any signs of weakness, then it would almost sort of go against me, or people might think I was weak, and therefore, well, do you know what? This isn't the sort of guy we want to be looking at promoting or upping along his career. So there really wasn't. I think people didn't speak up as much and put up with more as well, you know. But I did notice over the years that gradually things crept into industry, where people were talking more about stress for starters. And then it sort of came along the same side as things saying, you know, make sure you take a break every so often, you know, don't sit stuck at your computer for hours, that kind of thing. And then I think it's progressed. I mean, when I finished work, which was probably about 2.5 years ago now, I do remember there was so much more going on, and the company I worked for really had taken it by the, you know, the bull by the horns in terms of mental health, and was really starting to wake up and you know, and pay attention to it, and realize, I think, that actually, if you're going to listen to your employees and pay attention to them and let them talk about their mental health, then you know they're more likely to come back to work. You know, and I do wonder. I mean, I'm a bit of an old geezer now. You know, I'm approaching 60, but I do wonder whether, you know, this next generation of people, such as, you know, people your age, Paddy, and slightly older, you know, have kind of been brought up with a culture more where actually, you know, it's okay to talk, and I think that's great, you know, because it's going to keep so many people much, you know, much in a much better place, and why wouldn't we want to do that, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think you're alone in, you know, worrying about opening up about your mental health, and even now you talk to people and they still worry, but I do think it's much more accepted to um you know, be open and talk. And I do think my generation is yeah, is probably the most open, and hopefully that continues.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
talked briefly earlier about your daughter. Can you describe what kind of person your daughter was?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Helena was. We always describe her as a parent's dream. Really, she was no trouble at all. She was outgoing, you know, and she liked a good laugh. She'd. I mean, at the time, when she was a teenager, I mean, she used to sit and watch things like. She shouldn't have done probably, but I used to let her watch South Park with me, and you know, things like that. And you know, she had a great sense of humour. Lots of friends, loved socialising, loved drama, loved acting, performing arts, and that's what she wanted to do. You know, when she'd left sixth form, bless her if she'd ever made it. And yeah, I mean, she was just so good, really. So unassuming. Just a lovely person, you know. I mean, I know all parents will be biased towards their children, but Helena was. She was just you know, really nice, and she was, you know, ironically, she always seemed to be the one that was there for her friends to
Mm,
be called upon. So I just wish that, you know, she'd been able to speak up when, you know, when she got into the distress that she did on that fateful day that she took her own life. You know, it's a day that will
yeah,
stay with me forever.
yeah. I know it's I can't even begin to imagine. You've got the campaign now, Smart for
Yeah,
Helena,
yeah.
and one thing that I've noticed through watching lots of videos, and we'll talk about it a bit later, but coming to an event that you did, everybody talks about her smile, including your MP. Was that something that people talked about even back then?
It's a, it's an interesting one. I think towards, you know, when she was sort of 16, 17, she used to. I mean, the craze is still here today, isn't it? But was certainly there. Was starting off was the selfies. You know, taking lots of selfies.
Mm.
People, lots of young girls, particularly, you know, naturally smile. You know, a lot. She was always doing selfies and always smiling. Yeah, she developed a really nice smile in her late teens. Yeah, it's just something that I think particularly afterwards, when people look back after somebody has died, they look for the good qualities in people, don't they? You know, and
Mm.
I think that's one of the things that Elaine had. She always seemed to have a smile on her face, you know, ironically. But yeah, and so, you know, when we we were thinking about the campaign name, you know, we could have come up with something like suicide prevention in schools, or making sure, you know, teachers inform parents if kids or young people are distressed. But I just wanted something that was simple that we could then explain later. And Smile for Helena. Smile obviously is because, yeah, people remember her smile. Helena was her name. And the four, it's actually the number four in the middle. Smile for Helena. And the four actually is symbolic in the campaign, because it represents the four main parties that can benefit from our mission and our petition, which is our mission is that you know, schools should always notify parents if a young person becomes distressed or upset, um, when receiving any sort of feedback on their academic performance. Um, and so the four represents the four groups that can most benefit from it. Obviously, number one is the young people themselves, because they'll always be supported if they're feeling distressed. The second group is parents. You know, if parents know that if there's an issue with their child, they're going to get a call or they're going to get notified some way. That's great reassurance, isn't it? Um, Third group is the third beneficiaries are teachers themselves. You know, I'm absolutely sure that after Helena died, all of the teachers in, excuse me, in her school would have been mortified, and especially the people that had been there with her on that day, that may have, would probably reflect and say, crikey, perhaps we should have rang home when she got so distressed. So, of course, it's great for teachers. It's great reassurance for them that, you know, they're sharing that responsibility with parents, you know, taking like a more of a whole school approach. And then finally, you know, one of the main things in life is to drive down the numbers of suicides that we're seeing. So the fourth group is anybody who's interested in suicide prevention. So that's the kind of the kind of evolution of the Smile for Helena name as such.
Yeah, it's great. I think that you're so right about especially highlighting those four groups, because a lot of campaigns and policies that people put forwards can seem like they only kind of impact or help kind of one group, but actually everything that we're campaigning for as mental health or suicide prevention campaign has actually helped society so much as a whole. And it kind of comes back to that ripple effect of suicide. I think they say that 135 people
That's
are
right.
kind of directly affected.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you know, this is not a confined issue that it only affects what the person and their family. And can you just talk a little bit more about you know, what happened and why this is the focus of the campaign?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing that uh, I've learned from losing Helena, but also from, you know, looking at, you know, various people who've lost their lives to suicide, is that it is complicated, suicide, but in many cases there are ways you can prevent it. Just simple things that can prevent it. You know, just somebody being there for somebody at the right time, or, you know, something just to take somebody out of that darkness that they may be feeling just in one moment. Because, you know, we never thought in a million years Elena was capable of doing this. I really, really have to emphasize that. And one of the things I said as, you know, part of the press releases in the early days following Elena's death was, you know, if it can happen to my daughter, it can happen to anyone. I think, you know, so many people are touched by mental health issues nowadays. I think it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of young people, which is, you know, it's another reason why we're running the campaign, because those stats are just crazy. It just shouldn't be like that. But, you know, Elena went to school one morning for an interview with the teachers to discuss basically how she'd done in her exams, and what she wanted to do going forward, or what she could do going forward based on, you know, her results and everything. So this was 4 weeks after her exam results, you know. So it wasn't like it was just on the day she'd received her results. And the results weren't too bad. She hadn't done as well as she thought. She was disappointed. We know that, but, you know, she'd spoken online to a few teachers who said, "No, no problem, Elena. You know, when you come back, we'll sort some some different ways out for you to sort of, progress what you want to do, but, you might have to do a bit more work here and there. And she just went in for this interview. It was supposed to be a 3-minute interview, to discuss, you know, those subjects, what she was going to do next. And most of those kids, young people, were going in having a 3-4 minute interview with a teacher. It was in a multi-room environment, so there were lots of different teachers and young people having interviews at the same time. As I say, most of them run of the mill people were going in, coming straight out. Elena's interview, she got upset straight away as soon as she came in. She started crying. So much so that the first teacher had to pass her over to somebody else that he thought was kind of more experienced. And she was in the room, in that same room, for nearly an hour. Um, and she was crying most of the time throughout it. I mean, obviously, this is information I found out afterwards because I wasn't there, and that's one of the main issues is that we weren't there. But yeah, she got really upset. She was having really protracted conversations with the teachers about subjects that she didn't want to do going forward, and she started talking about herself, really negatively. I saw some of the statements, things like, "I'm a failure. I've failed at everything. I've let myself down." Um, and things to me that just sound like obvious trigger warnings. And to this day, I cannot understand why we didn't get a call just to say, "Look, don't know what's going on. Your daughter's got really upset. We're trying to calm her down. It might be just good if you'd just come up and make sure she's okay." I mean, even if they're just taking her out of the room or something. And I think, I don't want to have a go at the school too much, but I think, schools have priorities. And I think maybe the priorities that day, for them, weren't focused on the right thing. I know they
Yeah.
have a hard job. They've got a lot of kids to get through, got a lot to speak, a lot of kids to speak to. They just want to get the job done. They obviously want to make sure the kids are doing what they think is right, or what's good for the school. But I think it just would have been so much easier to have just given us a call and let us come up. You have to look at it in terms of the consequences. It would have been
Yeah.
a 20-second call, 30-second call to us. One of us would have been up there in 10, 15 minutes. We live locally. Would have found out what was going on, and she'd probably still be here today.
Mm.
But as it was, um, as you say, Paddy, you see so many people affected by the suicide. It's lifelong hurt. It's not just us and a mum and family. There's all of her friends. That will stay with them forever.
Mhm.
Teachers as
Yeah.
well. They're going to feel terrible. Even the ones that weren't there will feel terrible because you just do. It's a loss of a young life. I mean, this isn't just something I solely thought about as well because after the inquest, the coroner actually raised the point that it would be good school if you had a system in place for calling parents if a child became distressed. Even if you think that child is calming down or appears to have regained some form of composure. Um, yeah, there was a lot of best practice put together by the local authority as well. So they recognised things that could have been done better. One was obviously calling parents. The other was, why was there no breakout rooms used? Why was there nobody there who had any counselling skills? Yeah, good teachers, but none of them really had that kind of pastoral skills. So it's something that was recognised and something that I was happy that we built upon in the first few years after Elena's death, and the school adopted some safeguarding measure policies. And there was a best practice document that was issued to all schools in Staffordshire about how they should manage interviews and conversations with young people about their academic performance and what to do if things go wrong. But I think over the years, it's 10 years on now nearly, which is shocking. I just can't believe how quick the time's gone. But I noticed that things have slipped, and the best practice doesn't seem to be front and center anywhere. And we look at what's happening in schools today. We see the numbers, the stats going up of people struggling with their mental health. Teachers as well, they're struggling as well to get to grips with that. So what we're asking for is such a simple thing, just call parents if a young person becomes distressed when you're talking about these critical things. And let's face it, it is pressure for children and young people nowadays. It's not like it was 20, 30 years ago. It really is pressure on them. They're told how well they must do. And obviously they instill it in themselves that they've got to do really well. And yeah, so I just think it's just such a simple thing. It's not going to cost anything. It's just going to be a mandate to make sure schools do it. So I'm hoping that through our campaign, it'll gain enough attention, and people will say, well, look, if we're going to talk to young people about suicide prevention in schools, if we're going to teach it, we've got to also be prepared for when things go wrong. And this is a simple measure we can take, zero suicide policy or a zero suicide kind of attitude. That's what we should do, I think.
It seems just common sense, really. And it's not teachers calling home and calling parents isn't a new thing. I think I saw your wife get interviewed about it, and she said, you get call home if you're late, you get called home for uniform.
Yeah,
but it seems to be that kind of divide, and kind of going back to that time that you said, like 10 years on, and obviously it never leaves. But through those first kind of few weeks, few months, how did you manage to keep going? How did you manage to keep putting one foot in front of the other? Or was it just putting one foot in front of the other?
No, I think it's a combination of things, really. I mean, let's be honest, it was never going to be easy. It's just devastating. I don't know, if I'm honest, how we got through the first few weeks, months. I really don't. I look back at it and I'm just amazed we did. I think in one respect we were lucky that we had, good family network and good friends network. At work as well, they were really good with me. They really supported me, and they gave me the time and space. But also, kind of when I came back, they just treated me normally. They didn't sort of dwell on anything. And I think the darkest days are when it first happens, because you just don't know what to do.
Yeah,
you can't understand why the world's still moving. You just can't. It doesn't seem right, But as time progresses, you just start to get some normality back. You have to. And then, to be fair, me and Sharon we were fortunate enough to be able to go for some counselling, and we went for joint counselling. And I have to say that was so useful. So if anybody's ever thinking about whether they should or they shouldn't, believe me, please, if you're listening, go. Because you sit next to, especially anybody, couples who lose a child, because you sit next to each other, and for the first time, you actually get to talk to each other almost through a third person, and you didn't really understand how the other person was feeling. It's amazing. So number one was a counselling that really helped. The second thing was we were told about a support group called SOBS, which you may have heard of. Anybody who's been bereaved by suicide may well have heard of SOBS. So it's survivors of bereavement by suicide. So it's essentially set up for anybody who's lost somebody to suicide. You can go to these support groups, and we went to one that was sort of, in the locality, about 15 miles away, probably about 3 months after Helena died. And you walk into a room, and there's 9 or 10 people there who get you straight away, because they're all bereaved. Many by their children, some by husbands, wives, brothers, sisters. Well, they all get you, and you can speak without fear of being judged, because when it first happens, you feel like you've done something wrong,
Yeah.
even though you haven't. You know, you do, you do. You just feel so alien, and it takes a long while for that feeling to leave you. But again, if anybody's bereaved by suicide, I would really recommend them to seek support groups like SOBs, because you've suddenly meet people who are in the same boat, um, that, and suddenly, it doesn't make you feel your situation is any better, but you just realise that you're not on your own. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that helped us a lot. And then I think
Yeah.
probably after about 6 to 8 months, I started, we'd had the inquest, and I started looking at things a lot more in detail, and thinking to myself, well, why weren't we called that day, and what did go on that day? And that's when I started to piece together a case for, making change. And I think that helped, because that gave me a cause. And I say I did that for it took 3 years just to get something written down, actually, believe it or not, because things move very slowly. But, that, that, that helped as well. And then I think in our relationship, my wife Sharon, she is very strong, and she kind of, she's kept me going. I think about to deal with it on my own. I'm not sure.
Mm.
I'm really not sure. Where where I'd be, to be honest. So I think having a good partner, and being looking out for each other is so important as well.
Yeah.
And today, I mean, even 10 years on, you function much better. You've got a routine back, but the emptiness never leaves you,
Yeah.
and you just find ways of motivating yourself. And mine is to keep going, to try and help stop this from ever happening to anybody else again. I think that's my main motivation, and just looking out for myself and Sharon, and actually to anybody out there who's bereaved, or actually just if you've got generally struggling with your mental health. I think you've also got to try and be a bit selfish. And that sounds awful, but I think
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to recognise, don't put your excuse me, don't put yourself in places where you feel uncomfortable. I mean, we've all done it.
Mm.
We'd all do it all the time. Generally we like to please people, and we don't like to rock the boat. But I think, actually, if you're going to do something that's going to trigger you, or is going to make you feel bad about yourself or anything like that, don't do it. I mean, nowadays, myself and Sharon, we don't want to go somewhere, we don't go. If we go somewhere, we think it'll be painful for us, because maybe people talking about their kids and what they're doing, and what they're up to now, and how old they are, and what a success they've made of themselves and stuff. That's fine, and we obviously we want that for them. But if we don't feel that, we're going to be comfortable, then we don't do it. And I think, my message to anybody out there, whatever your issue in life is with your mental health or your experiences, try to be a bit selfish.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really good point. There seems to be a culture where you're kind of, especially on social media now, where it's all about putting yourself outside your comfort zone, and doing this, and pushing yourself, actually realizing that it's just okay to know what your triggers are, and
Yeah.
acting on those. And I think, yeah, it's a great point, and something that I forget, because I'm always looking to push myself, but actually, it is okay. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I don't think maybe it's not particularly selfish, but it's just being, you have to be, have your inner peace, and you're going to be the best version of yourself if you have that inner peace. So it leads to, that best version of you. And talking about, like, how you've got through, obviously it changes you, but do you think, how do you think you've changed since 2015?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think I probably lost confidence a little bit, with some things. I mean, I was always a really confident person. Always really outgoing, always social. Always joking, laughing, doing lots of lots of stuff. Um, and I think, I've lost that edge a bit. I'm always a bit more cautious now about things, and maybe a bit more, not introverted, but a little bit, yeah, just a little bit cautious of what can go wrong and things like that. I think underneath it though, deep down, I am the same person, and um, over time, you kind of come back to yourself as well. I mean, certainly in the first 6 months, I was, a completely different person, and then 2 years on, changed a little bit again, and so forth. So, I've still got my good sense of humour. I've still got, I'd still go out socialising, like a beer. I like to watch the footy. I love the music, and all that's still there. And of course, I think the thing you have to remember as well is, as you're aging, you're changing anyway. So, Paddy, when you were 15, how you felt then
Mm.
is relative, but you're now 20, 20 plus, and you're going to feel differently just because you are 5 years older and 5 years more experienced. Um, but obviously, having lost Helena, it makes you more empathic. That's for sure. When you've suffered, and you are suffering, you tend to feel people's pain more. So maybe in that sense, it's made me a better person, because I'm much less likely to judge people. And I always think, well, no matter how somebody is with you, you don't know what's going on with that person. Could just be having a
Yeah.
bad day, but they could be having a really, really bad time. And so, I mean, it goes a long way what they say, be kind. You never know what anybody's going through. So I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. I think overall, I'm more or less back to the same person I was. But I mean, there'll always be that emptiness, and that just it has to affect you. You can't get around that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand, and it's true. We're changing, and I definitely see that person. I know that when we've spoken, you've um got that kind of sense of humor, but it's yeah. These big events are huge. They always take something out of you, don't they? And it takes
You do.
a long
Yeah.
time to get back. But you talked about the campaigning, and you've been campaigning for the last 10 years, really. Um, and you have had real success in terms of changing the school and in your local area. Talk to me about that success and how did it come about? It was a long process, but as you say, everything when you want these changes is long. But how did it come about, and how did you feel when you got that change?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Paddy. When you say I campaigned for 10 years, I campaigned hard for about 3, 4 years, and then I did stop for a while. I'll explain why, and I picked it up again recently, in the last year or so. So yeah, I mean, basically, I looked at what the coroner said. What could have been done better on the day of Elena's school interview, to prevent anybody from doing or being, getting into a situation like that again. Um, and then, I started to ask questions, and I raised issues with Ofsted, the FSA, um, various other bodies, including the local authority, and you know, um, because what I was told was that things were going to change and they were going to make sure it would never happen again at the school. But I never saw any of that. I just saw words, and I thought, well, what good is it saying you're going to do this if you're not going to? So I actually, um, at the time, leave it a little bit of political influence to say, look, fine, just show me what you're doing then. That sort of got the school into sort of a form of action along with the local authority. I think the local authority audited the school and listened to me and came up with all the items that could have been handled better that day. Because it wasn't just about not having a call. It wasn't just about there not being a breakout room. There were lots of different things like, none of the teachers on that day understood the issues Helena had spoken to her other teachers, her actual subject teachers, about online. They were all completely unaware of the request she'd made. If they'd have been informed, then they might have been able to understand, her situation a bit more. They were giving her timetables for the following year with subjects on that she absolutely really didn't want to do. So why was that? Why wasn't some time given to because I think Helena left that day thinking she had to do something going forward that she really didn't want to. And so things like um, those points were raised as part of the best practice. 5 minutes, is it really long enough for an interview when it's really important things, and you just, no, it's not. So, again, that was another best practice points. There was about 12 best practice points in all. Got those documented, and eventually, for about 2 years, it got adopted by the local authorities, a best practice document. So that went round all schools in Staffordshire, which was made me feel, at least we've got something positive out of this very tragic situation. But then it was a case of then saying to the school, well, look, there's a document here, how are you going to work to it? And it took a long while, but we eventually managed to get the school to put the points directly in their policy as well. Again, that was fantastic, so I felt like I'd actually changed something, particularly at that school. And it was about 3 or 4 years in, and I wanted to make it best practice for the nation. I thought, if everybody agrees this is the right thing to do, the authorities agree it, head of Staffordshire Safeguarding agrees it, why don't we put it in all schools? And it's at that point where the school, they retracted then, and they said they didn't want to do any more work with me. They felt I'd taken enough of their time up. Yeah, just didn't want to support it. And it rocked me. It rocked my mental health, and I didn't do anything for a while because I just felt like nobody cares. I did have another go again several months later, but this time got a similar answer, which was, look, I think we've done enough and it's appropriate. And I was going to really sort of kick up a fuss at the time, but again, I just felt rocked by it, and it was a time in my life when I was really, really busy at work, and got a few things going on at home, and our life just takes over. So I'd always planned to come back to it, and that's what I've done recently. But one thing I realise is that what's happened. The whole issue is bigger than just my daughter or that school. It could have been any school, and it could have been anyone's son or daughter. I think that's the point. And that's where I'm now driven to look at it. So I look, sort of beyond the locality and say, well, look, this could happen to anybody, you know. And so, yeah, I thought about, should I go for reinventing all of the best practice points, because there's quite a lot of them. And then I thought, well, no, the key thing that day is actually the one simple fact is, if we had been called, this tragedy would never have happened. And it transcends everything else, because you say, well, doesn't matter what was said, what wasn't said, who was right, who was wrong, doesn't matter. Did she seem to calm down? Did she not? Am I sure whether she was all right or not? Doesn't matter. If somebody's been distressed and pretty distressed like Helena was, just call the parents. And that sort of it sort of circumvents everything and goes, yeah, that's the thing, one thing that you can do, and you know what? It's the safest thing to do. So, we've had the petition going now since about June, July. We had a brilliant response initially, over 1,000 signatures in a couple of weeks. And our MP, Jacob Collier, a fantastic chap, really, really got behind it wholeheartedly. And he's been a real help, we had, the media campaigns. We did the BBC article. which went out on, West Midlands News, which was great, I think, for raising awareness of it just before exam times. As you know, Paddy, we had the fun run organised by Kelly, who was one of Elena's best friends, and you kindly came along and did your bit as well. And in the process of raising awareness about the campaign, we also raised £3,000 for Papyrus, which, well, I think 3,200, which for a relatively small local event was really good. I was really, really chuffed
incredible.
with that. It's sort of, that was kind of the euphoric point, I think. We got over 2,000 signatures on the petition. We'd raised some money. We'd raised awareness. The MP was fully behind it, and then things sort of slagged off in the last few weeks. But the good thing is, and the thing I'm really pleased to tell you about, I don't know if you know, but Jacob Collier spoke in Parliament in and around Suicide Prevention Day, World Suicide Prevention Day, and has asked for access to an education minister on our behalf to try and get this change discussed and put in place. And I think that is, petition's one thing, and it's brilliant, and I want to carry on with the petition. I want to gather as many signatures as we can, because it just shows the weight of support. But the fact that we are going to get access at some point to a minister to talk about this is brilliant. And I'm really hopeful that they'll listen to me, listen to Jacob, and, maybe try and blend it in with the work that they're looking at doing next year in terms of, getting suicide education suicide prevention on the education curricula. So that's something I'm really, really hopeful for. The other thing, we've got about 2 months to run on the petition now, and so I want to try and ramp up a bit before Christmas, do a few more things. So I'm actually going to write to all the schools in England. I'm going to give a little survey out and see if they'll, voluntary, of course, and just ask them, what do they do? Do they have a system in place? Because one thing that occurred to me was that, maybe there are schools out there who actually do something very similar to what we're looking for, but it's just a local procedure. Conversely, I may find that not one school has anything in place, which it gives me even more impetus to raise the issue. And I think so. I'm going to ask schools, do have anything in place to call parents when their children are upset during feedback, or if not, the other thing I'm going to ask them is, I'm going to tell them about why we think it's a good idea, and ask them if they agree, or and get their comments, because I think in preparation for a meeting with a minister, if I've got some information that's coming back from schools that supports the cause, and I hope it will, I think that'd be really good.
It's incredible.
And so we're gonna try and do. Sorry, Paddy. We're going to try and do a few more, a bit more awareness campaigning on the social media, and do some flyer drops in the next few weeks leading up to the new year. And finally, I am thinking of doing Movember this year, just to raise some awareness about suicide in general. I know Movember is geared towards men's mental health as well, but I may do it just for everybody's mental health. Why should growing a tash be restricted just to men's mental health? So, I mean, the only thing there is, oh my God, the last time I had a tash, I was younger than you, Paddy, and it wasn't a pretty sight. It's probably one of the biggest monstrosities you've ever seen on anybody's lip. So I'm thinking, I might do this, try and raise a few quid and give everybody a chance to give me a bit of abuse. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's amazing. And even I think that's the key, isn't it? It's just whether it's a small thing like growing a moustache to a thing like, like the event you mentioned, Kelly running 100 kilometers in 24 hours, to, writing to every school. There's something that we can all do, isn't there? And you're just doing, amazing stuff, but it doesn't have to be a massive to make a difference, and to get people talking. And
No,
what
hopefully not. Hopefully not.
and so kind of coming to the end, but as we're talking about talking,
Yeah.
how important is talking about your mental health, for your own mental health, and how important is it, do you think, for everybody to talk about their mental health?
It's you know, in terms of mental health as a whole, I think I definitely advocate people talking. Um, but more than advocating people talking, I advocate people being allowed to talk and people being promoted. You know, we've got to get the message out there. I mean, yeah, again, it rolls off the tongue a bit. It's okay not to be okay, but it's true. You know, but rather than just sort of putting the phrases in, it's okay not to be okay. You know, speak up. Actually, you know, put words into action and encourage people. I'll always talk about my mental health now, and I'm not afraid to. Um, you know, because I think it is just such a release, you know, and you know, knowing what Helena went through, I can imagine. You know, I don't know what was going on in her head when she was, you know, that young girl, you know, who became so distressed. I'm sure it wasn't probably all about school. I mean, that seems to be the main thing, but I guess there were other things on her mind, you know, and as a young person, she probably had lots of issues that she hid from us, you know, and you never know. You know, we all deal with things, don't we, in the back of our.
Yeah,
It's just we don't always show it. And I think really, you know, encouraging young people to just come forward, you know, and it doesn't have to be anything big. Just talk to your mate, you know, pluck up the
yeah,
courage to talk to a mate, or get on one of the helplines, and even just text somebody. You know, there's the hope line for parachutes. You can text that, and so yeah, I think mental health is so important to talk about, and I'm that's why I'm here. You know, I want people to, excuse me, understand my story, and hopefully it might help one or two others. And I love talking to people like you, Paddy, because you know, you are, you know, compared to myself, you're a young person, and you're a young person who's experienced mental health, and there's so many young people who do, and I want to support these kind of things. You know, I'd rather be talking in a lot of respects to younger people about it, because that's where we can really make a difference. That's, you know, cultures roll in and roll out, you know. Just to make an analogy, you know, most of my age group still like to go to the pub and have a pint or two, or maybe too many sometimes. But no, a lot of young people, they don't drink. You know, they don't drink. And you know, that's fine. And actually, is that a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. It's just something that they're doing. Actually, you could argue it's a good thing, but it's a cultural thing, and like talking about mental health is a cultural thing, and I think it's far easier for young people um, to do so in today's environment. But of course, with the young people struggling more and more, it needs to be appropriate. We need to make sure you know, we keep telling people, you know, come forward, you know, and
yeah.
yeah. So I think what the stuff you're doing, Paddy, and all the other mental health campaigners is brilliant, and well done to you.
Thank you, thank you, and you know, the same for you. I think it's such incredible and so necessary work, and to be able to use, you know, your story, and I know how difficult it can be to recount such painful things, and yeah, I think what you're doing is just incredible. And coming on to the final question that I'd like to ask everybody, if you could give yourself, well, speak to yourself when you're at your lowest point, your kind of darkest days, and you could give that version of you some advice, what do you think you'd give him?
That's a good question, isn't it? I think I'd say, you know, just relax a minute, just hold up a minute, think about things. You know, difficult, I know, when you're in the darkest days, but just just think about the people around you and how much, you know, they would be affected, because you know, 9 times out of 10 there's somebody there that loves you, or somebody that,
Yeah,
excuse me, that needs you or relies on you. um I know that's a strange way of looking at it, but you know, they're the kind of things that keep you going. I always remember a tale from somebody, a chap and his wife who lost son to suicide, and they were sat there one night in their living room and in their darkest days afterwards, and they thought, "Look, what's the point? Shall we go? Shall we leave this world together? Shall we do it now?" And I don't know how seriously they thought about it, but I think one of them turned around and said, "Sorry, you've got to laugh about it as well." He said, "What about the dog? What are we going to do about the dog?"
Mm,
And it was that simple
yeah,
thing that sort of pulled them back from those thoughts. And I think, yeah, the advice I'd give myself is, look, it can get better. You will manage things over time. This is this is your toughest moment, but you will come through it. And there are people who need you and you need them, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
I think, yeah, 100%. I think it's so incredibly powerful and a great way to finish up what's been, a really incredible conversation. And I struggle to put into words my appreciation and my admiration for you, being so open and sharing so much and giving me so much time. And I know how, difficult it is. So thank you very much, Glenn. I really, really do appreciate it.
And it's not nice of you to say
And
so, Paddy, but at the end of the day, if I can, I'm just, excuse me, just a grieving dad, and
mhm,
I just want to make a change that'll help other people. So thank you,
yeah,
Paddy.
and you're definitely doing that. Do you want to kind of shout out the social medias and the
Yeah,
kind
great
of
idea.
petition? I'll put
Great
I'll put
idea.
the links in the description anyway, but
Well,
if you
yeah,
say it as well.
that's brilliant. So our social media handle is hashtag Smile for Helena, which is SMILE number 4 HELENA, one word. You'll find us, because I'm a bit of an old geezer, you'll find us predominantly on Facebook, but we are on Insta now as well, and just started on TikTok. And you'll
Oh,
also
brilliant.
find me, Glen Markey, so that's GLENMARKEY, on LinkedIn. One of my pinned posts there has got our petition. And yeah, I mean, if anybody could sign the petition, mean a lot, really would.
Yeah, I'll reshare it with the post and it'll be in the description. So yeah, please do go ahead and sign that. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening. It's been a very kind of emotional conversation, but I think one that was 100% worth having. So thank you everybody for listening, and I will catch you in the next one. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Now We're Really Talking. If anything in this episode has brought up difficult feelings for you, please reach out for support. You don't have to go through it alone. If you're in the UK, you can contact Samaritans on 116 123 or contact Shout by texting 85258 or visit mind.org.uk for mental health support. If you're listening from outside the UK, you can find international helplines at findahelpline.com. Remember, there's always help out there, and talking about it is a strength, not a weakness.